We were taught that fairies belonged to old stories. Yet today people are encountering them quietly, unexpectedly, in ordinary life. I'm Claire Casely, a fairy whisperer and your guide on this journey. On the Fairy Whispering Podcast, I speak with guests who've met these beings at the edges of perception and the thresholds of the everyday. To catch a fairy whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello and welcome to the Fairy Whispering Podcast. I'm Claire Casely, your host. I'm excited to share that my 2-volume series, The Heart of Pixieland, is now available for Kindle pre-order, and all formats will be published on the 13th of July. These books were shaped during a time of deep change, and they hold many themes that we explore here: belonging, land connection, and the quiet magic that moves at the edges of things. And if you'd like early access to episodes and occasional behind-the-scenes reflections from my creative world, you're warmly invited to join the Fairy Whispering Patreon community. Tonight we step into the strange folklore of Pennsylvania. I'm joined by Tim Renner, artist, illustrator, musician and podcaster and author, whose work has long explored the shadowed edges of the unseen world. Tim shares stories from his upcoming book, The Keystone Hagstone, where fairies, Sasquatch, black dogs and other mysterious beings emerge from the woods and old stones. Their stories are as rich and uncanny as any found here in the West Country of England. We talk about the eternal hunter, the goblin-like bouts, and the curious parallels between Pennsylvania's fairy lore and the stories of my own southwest England. Tim also speaks about dousing, the art of gifting to the fae, and the strange synchronicities that seem to follow him through his research. This is an episode for anyone who senses that the world is stranger and more enchanted than it first appears, and slightly creepy too. This is the Keystone Hagstone Part 1, because I'm really thrilled to say that Tim will be returning for an upcoming episode. So hi Tim, welcome to Fairy Whispering.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. If you'd like to give everyone who's listening a little bit of an intro to yourself and say a bit about you and what you do. I know you do loads of things, but
where to begin? I artist, illustrator, musician, podcaster, author. You choose which one of those comes first on my resume. You know, so I kind of do a little bit of everything. I was talking with somebody about this recently, like, boy, you do a lot of stuff. I said, yeah. When you're poor, if you want something to exist in the world, you have one choice. You can make it yourself, or that's about it, because no one's going to do it for you. So I kind of learned to do everything that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I know you through your podcast, StrangeFamiliars, that I'm a great fan of, and I find it really fascinating, some of the things that you discuss on the show, and you cross over into fairy. I mean, my sort of focus is fairy, but under that umbrella, I cover Sasquatch, Bigfoot.
It's all connected,
cryptids,
right?
Everything,
It feels to me like it's all I'm not saying it's all the same thing, but it's all connected in some way.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear about the book that you're researching and writing at the moment about fairies in your part of the world.
So, for those of outside the states, I'm not sure how well this is known. Pennsylvania is referred to as the Keystone State. I guess it's like the keystone of the states in the Atlantic there. And the book's called The Keystone Hagstone because it's about fairies and these other mysterious beings in Pennsylvania that, you know, maybe it's a stretch to some people might think to put them in with fairies, but to me, not really because they're not ghosts, they're not cryptids. They're these other things that seem to be part of the land, or they're part of folklore that people brought with them when they moved from Europe and came here, immigrated, way back in the day. So, but there's plenty of actual fairies, banshees and little people, and you name it, leprechauns. We have all that here, but there's also these things like there's a Pennsylvania thing called the Eternal Hunter, and it's a one of these cursed hunters that's roams forever hunting with his pack of dogs, which is a form of the wild hunt. And as far as I know, until I'm proven otherwise, I'm going to say it's the only instance of Odin in the New World that we have this Eternal Hunter character. So it's also entities like that, along with your more so-called traditional fairies. Black dogs, have a lot of black dog reports in Pennsylvania of not just dog ghosts, but these are your Barghest types. These giant things with glowing eyes, or sometimes they're headless, and lots of reports of that. And we have here what they call hex cats, which are sort of the cat version of the black dog thing. These are big black cats that have glowing eyes and manifest. They said there's as long as a fence, with tails as long as a fence rail, and they manifest around these supernatural events and stuff. So it's a kind of a big umbrella, but I think it all fits together.
Yeah, I think so. It's similar. I mean, I come from the southwest of England, where there's lots of similar folklore. The black dogs, the wild hunts here on Dartmoor, near where I live. Yeah, fairies, pixies, as we call them in this part of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, interested in those crossovers. So, what's your, because I think your main interest is Bigfoot, is that right? Or
I
is
mean, yeah, I love Bigfoot, and it's the wild man archetype, whatever you want to call it. Bigfoot is the sort of the modern manifestation of that. And that was my sort of gateway into the paranormal, even as a youngster. I love Bigfoot. It's odd because, I actually saw a UFO when I was about 8, I think. My mom woke me up one night and said, "Do you want to come see a UFO?" So this wonderful UFO sighting, which may or may not have some missing time associated with it, but I didn't get interested in UFOs. You would have think that would have put me on the UFO track, but from a child, I was always fascinated with Bigfoot. And growing up, I was born in 1970, so the Patterson-Gimlin film would have been 67. 1970, not long after Legend of Boggy Creek comes out, and In Search Of was a show over here. I don't know if you all had it over there.
no?
It was kind of exploring the mysteries kind of thing. They had Bigfoot shows quite frequently on there. So it was, I say I grew up in like the golden age of Bigfoot, and really, as a child, just fired my interest. And when I came back to the paranormal and the stuff as an adult, that's kind of what I gravitated to. So yes, Bigfoot is kind of my main interest, but it's more that it was a gateway into it. I'm really interested in the whole spectrum of it.
Yeah, similar here, that fairies were my gateway and into lots of other things. Yeah. So
And I'm going to misquote Patrick Harper here, who Demonic Reality, which I always say is, if you're going to read one book about the paranormal, I think that's the one to read. And he said something along the lines of, Bigfoot is just a big hairy fairy, which is, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard, just referring to one of the episodes I was listening to actually today, I've been listening to a few fairy related episodes, and the one that you did with Joshua Cutchen about fairies and Sasquatch. Because it's Sasquatch and the fairy realm. And there's and there's a brilliant story that you quoted on there about a boy that is taken by Sasquatch into a cave in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, I've read a story like that as part of my fairy research.
Yeah.
And it's called The Lost Child, and it's from Cornwall
Oh
in
wow.
like the 1840s. I can send it to you, but he's literally taken away and he's taken into an underground cave where there are all these big crystals on the ceiling and it's just beautiful and the stars in the sky. And he's taken by a beautiful woman into this place. And people find him a few days later. His family find him just sleeping on a bed of ferns.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, I thought, oh my gosh, that reminds me of that
Oh,
story.
it's so similar. It's
Yeah.
yeah, like they're this for people who aren't familiar, it's a young boy who's out in the woods, and this is in the 1800s in Washington
Mm,
State, so very very wild area. And he gets one thing leads to another, and he gets taken by this wild man, apparently a Sasquatch. They describe it just like 10 feet tall and hairy and things like that. And he's taken to this underground chamber, and in it, this he thinks he's going to be eaten. Like you said, I think he's described it as seashells on the ceiling, like beautiful
mm,
seashells. That's a very very similar account. The Sasquatch leaves, and a beautiful woman appears and tells him, "You got to get out of here." He climbs. This is by memory. It's been a while since I've read it, but I think he
yeah.
climbs up, and he's able to use a knife to open the earth, which is again you find that in fairy accounts where people drive the knives in the hills to open them up. And he specifically mentions hawthorn that there was hawthorn either at the entrance or that he was climbing up. I forget which,
Mm,
but it's and some days go by. He wanders the woods and finally finds another human, and they take him to civilization. He tells this story. But yeah, the parallels between the sort of fairy
yeah.
stories like the one you mentioned are incredible and really eye-opening. As
Mm,
I often say with Bigfoot stuff, when it gets weird, you have these folks and they're well-meaning. They want Bigfoot to be an animal that's out there, that's something we can put in a cage. And they're trying to prove it to the world, and they're very earnest, and they're very pure in their motives. So I don't mean to demean them. In order to have Bigfoot fit in this, animal silo that they like to put him in, they disregard all the weird stuff about Bigfoot.
mm,
And there's so much of it. Josh and I, the fellow you mentioned before, Josh Kutch and I, have written 2 books so far about the weirdness associated with Bigfoot, Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2. And they're thick books, and we didn't list every story. We pick and chose a few examples to sort of highlight the points we were trying to make. There's tons out there. I mean, we could have,
mm,
if we were just going to list every example of strangeness that accompanies Bigfoot, it would have been a 10-volume series easily. I mean,
mm,
there's more of it than not, honestly. So when I say stories like that, people immediately dismiss it. Oh, that kid was crazy, or there's the writer embellished it, blah blah blah. And I always say, if you're going to believe somebody when they say they saw an 8-foot hairy man in the woods,
mm.
you also have to believe him when they said there was a UFO flying above him, or he was accompanied by strange lights, or whatever else they're saying. And the people, again, with good intention, but they're disregarding that stuff, and they're saying, "Oh, they were mistaken when they saw the UFO, but they really did see the Bigfoot or whatever it is." And my feeling is, no, you got to take it all. You have to, if you're going to believe these witnesses, you have to take everything they say.
Yes. And I'm intrigued because what do you think about photographic evidence of paranormal?
This is very interesting. I've been talking about
Yeah,
this a lot
yeah.
lately. There's a new movie about fairies that is coming out this week
Oh,
called Rabbit Trap. And in
ah,
that, it's very much about sound. It's
mhm,
about a young couple in the 1970s who moves to remote Wales, and they're experimental musicians. And the guy accidentally records this otherworldly sound, and they start making music with it. But this stranger appears. But in any case, it's very much about sound. And there's this quote in the movie that let me find it here. I don't want to misquote it. They say, yes, here it is. Sorry. Through your eyes, you enter the world. Through your ears, the world enters you. And that's really my feeling on the paranormal. In other words, you're first of all, the other is my blanket term for the paranormal, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It doesn't like to be defined and nailed down. You know,
Mm.
in my new book, I say it's like kind of like trying nailing smoke to a board. It's not, it'll change, as soon as you try to define it, it'll change a little bit. It doesn't like that. So if you're trying to capture an image with photos, and this may change now that AI is coming, there is a element of ego involved. In other words, you're saying, I'm going to capture this and I'm going to prove it to the world. This is what I'm going to have, and I'm going to show people and they will believe me. And I think the phenomenon just naturally is like, no, you're not. That's not. It's, again, taking it back to fairy stories. Often, in my book, there's a fairy midwife story where this woman's taken to be a midwife for the fairies, and it's beautiful. She's looking around fairyland, and she says, I can't wait to tell everybody what I saw here. And this old fairy woman says, oh, no, you're not, and pokes her eyes out with a cane, and she's blind for. So it was there, like, once she brought her into it, and I'm going to tell everybody about it, that's when bad stuff happens. And I'm not necessarily saying bad stuff, but I think the stuff, it doesn't like to be defined, and it's always going to leave that question mark of proof there. And I think audio, we're allowed to record it for some reason. There's amazing audio out there. Well, EVPs, for people who are interested in Bigfoot, the Sierra sounds are amazing. I've gotten tons of amazing audio in the time I've been doing this, just anomalous stuff. Video, it's always blurry. It's always questionable. It's, and again, this may change with AI because there's a question mark with all video now.
Yeah.
Right. So, I see videos every day on Instagram and so forth of, purporting to be Bigfoot. And I just immediately go, that's probably AI. I don't know. So I think that might change because now there's going to be question marks around video. But as far as like up till now, I think it's like the chance of getting a clear picture of Bigfoot, a clear film of Bigfoot, a clear film of anything, a ghost, anything. Very slim. Audio's the way to document it, I think. At least I've had success with that. But again, with AI, maybe this will change. But we're always going to have question marks. We're always going to
we are. And I'd love to come back to your book and some examples from your book. But I was just going to say that the thing is that AI analyzes the imagery as well. So if you think, great, well, I've captured something there, AI can only go on the information that it has, the data that it has. So it might interpret it as, oh, well, that's I don't know, that's a flower.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, no, it's a little person or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get sent, doing what I do, I get sent a ton of photos by people who are like, hey, look at this. And I don't always see what they say is in the pictures. They'll have the red circles, like, there's a fairy here, I see Bigfoot's face here. But I always say, look, I don't see it, but that doesn't mean anything. It's more about your feeling when you took the photo.
Yes. Yeah.
Because again, I'm beyond trying to prove this to people who don't believe it. I don't care. I know it's real. I know it's true. I know a certain percentage of the population is going to always call people like us crazy or, weird or whatever they want to call us. And I'm not speaking to them anymore. Like I'm happy for them to read my books. Yeah. I don't mean like I won't speak to them, but I'm just saying like that's not who I'm writing for. I'm not writing to prove it to people who don't believe it. I'm writing for the people who already know.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, so I'd love to hear, Tim, something from your book, some of the research that you've been doing. Can you give any examples of fairy stories or black dogs?
Yeah, I could probably read one if I pull it up. So a lot of it is the Pennsylvania Dutch folklore. In a way, it's documented really well because it's a insular culture to an extent. Has its own language, so it's a misnomer. Dutch, they're not Dutch. It's Deutsch that English speakers misunderstood. So it's actually they're Germans from the Palatinate. So it's Swiss, Germany, and Alsace region of France. That whole sort of region is where the Pennsylvania Dutch came from. And the language of Pennsylvania Dutch is not, it's close to German, but it's actually very close to Luxembourgian, which is a, very unique kind of thing. So they were great at documenting anything that had to do with the language and anything that had to do with like folk art and things like that. But when it came to entities, they were not so good at documenting that, like the belief in these different entities and so forth. So I found two sources for Pennsylvania Dutch fairies. One sort of more modern one, but the guy has done some incredible research, and one that was, I think, published in the 1950s, but the guy was born in the 1800s. And those are the two sources that only talked about these certain entities that the Pennsylvania Dutch believed in, which are, absolutely, these fairy entities. So let me call it my book. But as I was saying, because of that lack of folklore, a lot of what I do is newspaper research. So you can, if it's not there in the documented folklore, you can go and find these accounts in newspapers. So a lot of the book is reprinted newspaper accounts from, the 1800s, early 1900s of people actually seeing these things, which is as close as I could get to, firsthand, accounts of this stuff these days. Well, we could talk goblins. Okay.
Yeah,
So
goblins.
Yeah.
Great.
Right here in York County, where I live, is South Central Pennsylvania. My friend Chad, who's often on Strange Familiars, he was telling me, he said, "Oh, my parents would tell me, or I think it was grandparents. My grandparents didn't want me to go out in the woods because they said that the bouts would get me." He said they kept talking about the bouts, and I'd never heard that before. And I knew it was some kind of hobgoblin or boogeyman type figure, but I found other accounts of it from Lebanon County and a place in Egypt, Pennsylvania. They named the creature the buckle bouts, and it's just this sort of goblin, like boogeyman of the woods. We have red caps here. The Pennsylvania red caps are discussed. This is an article from 1887, ironically in Pennsylvania Dutch folklore. The article is about, and it says, "The red caps, the same as Germany and Great Britain, still occasionally haunt these people. They are industrious sprites that work ceaselessly for their masters until offended. Then all ill luck follows. But of late, these fairies have suffered profanation from a sinister remark. If Casper Kunz piles up rich too fast, or if Jacob Yost goes to the dogs rapidly, the neighbors shake their heads and say with a spice of spite or derision, 'Ah, Casper's red caps are lousy,' or 'Jacob didn't know a red cap from old Nick.'" So they're kind of, I think they put them less in the sort of aggressively mean category than, more like a household spirit, I suppose, like the ones they're talking about.
Right. Over here, red-capped fairies, or if somebody saw a fairy with a red hat, then people would be like, there must be gold there. They're associated with gold.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
I read a quote from one of the researchers I was reading about who said that if archaeologists heard a story about a red-capped fairy being seen in a field, they'd want to be there straight away to dig up the field.
Interesting.
And, yeah.
Very interesting. So we have a goblin monk, a story of a goblin monk here. So I'll just read right from my book. "A different sort of goblin roams east in Pennsylvania. This creature is manifest from the corpse of a greedy monk. This idea troubles some in the paranormal community, as their belief in goblins are separate from ghosts, and ghosts are separate from spooklights, and each and every weird thing should be siloed and kept from all the others. For those of us who look for connections, given the idea that, at least in some folklore, fairies and the dead are closely related, and sometimes one and the same, a corpse transforming into a goblin seems on brand for the fae. The monk in question resided at a mission in Easton sometime before the French and Indian War. This monk used his position to gain information on the local populace via the sacrament of confession. He would then blackmail people with their darkest secrets, demanding gold and silver to buy his silence. The evil monk even encouraged people to continue their wrongdoing in private, while publicly he would rail against them. At some point, the cruel monk beat an old woman to death. He was imprisoned and eventually hanged for his crime. When his corpse was cut from the gallows, it began to transform. Tusks grew from either side of his nose. His white hair grew long and greasy. His teeth turned to fangs. His hands and feet twisted into claw-like appendages. His eyes opened and revealed an eerie yellow glow, visible even under the noonday sun. The goblin monk rose and disappeared into the surrounding forest. He returned at night to prey on the other monks at the mission. Their prayers and banishments had no effect on the goblin. After 5 monks were killed at the hands of the goblin, the mission was abandoned. So that's, more of a legend. I didn't really find any
Yeah.
newspaper articles pointing to that, but there's another book written by a man named Mayberry. It's called Vampire Universe, and he talks about goblin scarecrows in Pennsylvania. And this is a quote from him. These were in Berks, Bucks, Cambria, Elk, McKean, Tioga, and Westmoreland counties, Pennsylvania. Beginning in the mid-1950s and persisting to this day, there are legends of a demonic scarecrow with the grinning head of a jack-o'-lantern that haunts the farmlands. This creature, dressed in rags and wearing a pumpkin head, whose features can actually move and whose mouth can bite, does not have a body filled just with straw, but its mass is made up of tens of thousands of insects that are held together in the shape of a man by sheer demonic force of will. So I thought that one was odd, but it seems connected to these stories of Der Bootsman and Die Bootsfrau from Pennsylvania lore. They're sort of scarecrow effigies. The term is sometimes mistranslated as boogeyman, but boots is roughly translated as ragged or worn clothes. The bootsman was given domain over the fields, but as Adam had Eve, so too did the bootsman have the bootsfrau. The bootsfrau's job was to guard the chickens or other animals. Powwow doctor, so that's a local folk healing tradition here. It's called powwow. It's related probably to your sort of wise women and so forth. Just as a folk healing tradition. They think they called it that because whatever they were doing, it looked like what the Native Americans were doing. These powwow doctors with their gestures with their hands and so forth. So the powwow doctors, also known as Braukers, sometimes Hexenmeisters, practiced a kind of Christian folk magic which came to America with the Swiss German population. Sometimes powwow doctors would be called upon to play special charms inside the bootsman to keep away certain pests, for instance. The bootsman and the bootsfrau were to be treated with kindness and respect. It was considered bad luck to steal clothes from a scarecrow. They're not to be hit or otherwise mistreated. Dennis Boyer, in his book of Pennsylvania folklore, Once Upon a Hex, details some of the folkloric rules established for Der Bootsman. Never have it out before Easter, as it would mock the crucifixion and resurrection. The head must always point to heaven and be covered with a hat. Never put it up on May Day. Put him in the shade on the longest day of the year. Set a glass of water in front of him if it's dry. Put him in the smokehouse if it's too wet. And most important, have him taken down or destroyed before midnight on Halloween.
Ooh.
So the clothes, the sticks, the stuffing, and any other components of the scarecrow were to be burned. The clothes were never to be worn again. If they were, tragedy could befall whoever dared to don the scarecrow's attire. If the scarecrow was left in the field until November 1st, there was a risk of it becoming possessed and animated by unclean spirits. The bootsman, now mobile, could create all manner of havoc in the community, from acts of mischief to greater harm, such as burning barns or spreading disease. The bootsman could appear outside the homes of wrongdoers, ominously marking a sinner's residence. He could also appear in the beds of their unmarried daughters, or make a poltergeist-like racket in their attics and basements. Sometimes, the wandering bootsman could be appeased by the creation of a bootsfrau to keep him company. So the bootsfrau, too, should be burnt before Halloween, lest the cycle of evil repeat. So last of all, we had these things called straw men, or putsmumeli in Pennsylvania Dutch. The straw men were sort of golem-like creatures, crafted from straw and brought to life by magical means. They were given specific duties, such as delivering messages or retrieving stolen items. They wore necklaces of pretzels and masks of different creatures, usually relating directly or symbolically to the straw man's assigned task. So these straw men were actually employed by the Pennsylvania Dutch fairies. They would use them as messengers and to retrieve stolen items and stuff. Okay. So they were the ones that somehow animated these straw men.
That's fascinating and a bit creepy.
Yeah. I think some of the stuff gets pretty odd. But
so the Pennsylvania Dutch fairies, is that a whole range of different fairy types, or are you talking about a specific type of being that animates these scarecrows?
The thing that animates the scarecrow was just some kind of evil spirit.
So the fairies use these straw men to do their bidding. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Barak Mops or Berg Mops was the mountain dwarf, and he's the
Mm.
king of the underworld. He could transform himself into a groundhog, and he held domain over metals and minerals from the earth. There was a fairy blacksmith named Silas Huffnagel, and that was his son. So these Pennsylvania Dutch fairies, they were very much human-like. You know, some of them were dwarfs and small, but they could walk among the humans often and be among the humans. Some of them had very human names, like that Silas Huffnagel. They were born usually from eggs, so they had no navels. So and they'll often say
Okay.
this fairy was born from a blue egg, or this fairy was born from a green egg. Bush mops or the Wald mops is the forest dwarf, and he's brown or gray skinned. He's the king of the forest. He appears in animal form as a wren or a white stag with golden antlers, and he's protected by a gigantic horn-tailed snake called the Hanishlong. And then there's a fellow named Glee Hans, and he was a dwarf tinker, and he had 3 penises. And he could take the form of a billy goat, ironically. For obvious reason, he was also known as Schlangman, which is the snake man. So he was a master craftsman, a maker of utensils, many of which had magical properties. He's known for his virility and was often sought. He would say he was sought for fertility issues, obviously. And
Okay.
they would ask
Yeah.
his help. And people asking for his help could visit or leave offerings at a rock formation appropriately known as Coxcomb in the Welsh Mountains here in Pennsylvania. And then we have
Fantastic.
a funny one is Spiegelmops, and he was a mischievous dwarf. He appears on the other side of the mirror and twists your reflection and makes you appear fatter and less attractive than you really are. I like that one. It's his fault we don't look at him.
That sounds very much like some of Brian Froud's art. You know his fairies. He
Yeah, oh,
plays
absolutely.
with those ideas, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and there's a whole sort of a family of entities. There's almost a family tree of these Pennsylvania fairies. This one was married to that one, and they gave birth to this one. It's very, very interesting. There's a woman, and I forget the Pennsylvania Dutch name. Her basically translates to snake woman, and she's sort of the queen of the fields, and she uses the snake as a wand, but she would transform into a rabbit. Lot of neat rabbit folklore I found too in Pennsylvania. So we have witch rabbits, which were witches in rabbit form, and you have graveyard rabbits. Now, witch rabbits will be found around but not in graveyards, and then you have graveyard rabbits, which the old legend of taking a rabbit foot for good luck, that actually comes from the graveyard rabbit. It wasn't any rabbit. You were supposed to get a graveyard rabbit, and it was supposed to be, I think, their left rear foot was what you were supposed to get. So, they were considered good luck. And then there's this, the snake woman transforms into a rabbit. Very interesting. At somewhere down the line, I'm gonna do a book on rabbits, I think.
Yeah, there's so much, isn't there, with rabbit lore.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, something really interesting happened actually at my uncle's funeral earlier this year. At the end of the funeral, we were wandering around finding other family graves, and this hare appeared. I mean,
wow.
hares are massive, and he just appeared. Me and my son saw him, and they run, they don't hop, they just ran off. I was like, oh my gosh, how symbolic is that, seeing a
Right.
hare?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other examples you want to share, Tim? Or
Let's see here. So we have Tommy knockers.
yeah. Yeah.
There's a neat letter that was printed in a Washington, D.C. newspaper in 1929. And I'll actually read the letter. So it's an article, and then it has the actual letter in it. It says, a friend of mine who is given to occult research and who incidentally came from the county Wexford, Ireland, once told me solemnly that radio was causing distress among the little folk, that they lived within range of radio vibrations, and that while the wave impulses did not come to them as sound, they were most disturbing and had caused the migrations of many fairies to remote places. I had supposed that this friend was the only person in the world who was thinking about this, but here today is a letter from Gavin Dishart, a coal miner, who says some of his mates are worrying about radio driving the Tommy knockers out of the mines. So the Tommy knockers were good and bad. you wanted them there because they could warn you in the mines, but they could also cause problems. So he says, "Dear Mac, you have such a good Scotch name, so I am sure you'll be giving a bit of your valuable time to hearing about something that is causing a deal of bother and argument among the lads in the coal mines. And there's a Cornishman called Walter Andrew who has a great store of knowledge about the Tommyknockers. These little creatures are kind-hearted little people, and they will give a man a warning of a cave-in or an explosion by tapping on the face of the shaft. Sometimes we coal miners think we haven't a friend in the world, but we always know the Tommyknockers are looking out for us. Many's the life that has been saved by these wee things with their knocking. Well, this Walter Andrew is pumping water out of an old sump when along comes another big cousin Jack and says the companies ought to put radio in every level of the mine so we could have music when we were working. Walter Andrew stops pumping and looks as if he would be at the other man's throat. Would you drive out the few Tommyknockers we have left, he yelled. With all this squealing and blathering coming right through the earth, it's bad enough for them as it is. With one of those radio boxes with the great din filling the mine, how could we hear them knocking, even if they weren't panicked and driven away? The day would come when we'd all be caught in a cave-in, and never a word of warning from the little people. The other man was strong-headed, and we had to tear them apart and quiet them as best we could. Since then, there's been a great bellowing and arguing among the men that 3 times the pit boss has had to stop it. Yesterday, a powder monkey stole the pics of 2 of them to keep them from bashing each other with them. To have a bit of peace, it was thought best that I write you. And would you be interested to tell us if there be a likelihood that radio could come into the great blanket veins where the Tommyknockers hide and cause worriment?" So that's a letter. These are absolute believers.
Yes.
And these miners were very serious about it. They really believed it and they took it to heart.
Yeah, and obviously miners are very, very superstitious, aren't they? So
Yeah.
that would be important to them. We have the knockers here in Cornwall because I think a lot of the miners from Cornwall and Devon came over to the US and brought that tradition with them, didn't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have pasties over there?
Not that I found.
Right, okay.
So what is explain?
So a pasty is like it's basically pastry that's folded over meat and potato.
Okay.
And it has a big crust around one side. So miners here in Cornwall and Devon, they would have those for their lunch because they would use the crust as a handle if their hands were dirty, so they could just eat the pasty and hold the crusty handle. But there was a tradition of miners gifting some of their pasty to the knockers. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if you've come across any fairy traditions where there's that gifting exchange.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly. It's definitely there. I'm pretty sure some of the miners were doing that. There's definitely in the Pennsylvania Dutch fairy stuff I found, they would leave gifts at the corner of gardens and fields because they said that the fairies were in the corners of gardens and fields and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. And different ones you would appease with different things. This one liked, water and bread, and this one liked something else and so forth. So yeah, it absolutely came. A big part of this book, the idea is that folklore travels with people. So I found a Irish community in northern Pennsylvania, and the folklore was preserved incredibly. Their fairy folklore just came with them. I was told one day I had this unusual experience of my own, and in this little copse of trees, and there was a big stone mound inside the copse of trees where it happened. And I told, it was actually Josh Kutch, and I was telling him about it. I said, if this was in Ireland, that would have been a fairy fort. And he said, very forcefully to me, there are no fairy forts in Pennsylvania. And I absolutely found them in this folklore from this town. Fairy forts, fairy rafts, pukas, leprechauns, you name it. They have it all there. Folklore travels with people. And it's sometimes people want to think of these things almost like they're animals. In other words, leprechauns are Irish, so they should be in Ireland and they shouldn't be in America. I think it's, it may be appropriate for a person of Irish descent, if they see a little person in America, to have their own folklore, sort of draped upon it. I think culture and folklore and everything is bound up into this. And I think it's And it's natural for people to say, "Oh no, you should use the Native American name," but that's not really their culture. They don't know what that means. They do know what a leprechaun is, and by their descriptions, they're describing leprechauns.
Yeah.
They're not describing these Native American people. So people bring their folklore with them, and I think that for again, if you want to think of these things like animals,
Yeah.
the tigers are in Asia. They're not in America. But folklore is different, and the other is very different, and it comes with people, and it changes, and then it becomes an amalgam. Sometimes you get these combinations of different things, like with the red caps in the Pennsylvania Dutch folklore. It's obviously
Yeah.
not. They've turned it into something that's similar but not quite the same.
Yeah. I was interviewing a friend yesterday who's written a fairy opera. She works very much with sound. And we were recording actually the ghost of this church. It's this ghostly singing. Now, the way she interprets it is that she says, well, that's just an audio effect to do with the traffic going by. But it was just amazing. It's like call and response with this voice in
Wow.
this church, and it was different tones.
Hmm.
But the reason I'm mentioning that is she was talking about the theory of affect and how we affect objects and ensoul them by holding them. And so it's kind of what you're saying about how people are the key. I think they bring, and the land obviously as well.
Yes.
What's in the land, the stories of the land, the energies in the land. But we come along with everything that we are carrying, our belief systems, and that's where the alchemy happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brings it alive. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And there's something else there that we don't understand as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always that sort of
Yeah.
otherness to it. And I don't just have, it's not just historical accounts. I do have some, modern accounts in the book. And one of my favorites, and I think this ties together, Bigfoot and fairies and just the way all of this works. And it was collected by my friend Tyler Strand, who people might know from the Hellier documentary and the Unbinding.
Yeah.
And he was at a UFO event in Pennsylvania, and this woman told the story, and I'm just going to quote Tyler right here. So what she told me is that her cousin, when she was little, was playing inside of her garage. She was between 8 and 12 years old, somewhere in that age range. She was playing in her garage alone, and on the floor of the garage there was a manhole cover for drainage. While she's playing, the cover starts to rattle and shake. It slides open, and out crawls this little old man. Seems like a gnome. The child looks at him, and they both lock eyes. Out of nowhere, they start wrestling with each other. She said her cousin, after they were rolling around and tussling for about 5 minutes, they stopped, looked at each other, and just started laughing. And this little man said to her, "You know what? I'm going to give you the gift of protection from apes." And she said ever since that day, her cousin has been haunted by seeing things that look like Bigfoot walking around the periphery of her yard. She said a mist will appear, and they'll literally form out of the mist. And she said she's had sleepovers with her cousin, and she saw this firsthand. A mist appeared inside her room, and a thing that looked like a monkey-human hybrid manifested out of the mist with glowing green eyes, hovered there, and then vanished. And it's so neat because it's just that way in which these things conduct themselves.
Yeah.
So the gift to the gnome-like being would seem at first to be granting her protection from any assaults by simians, but however these ape-like things appear around her, it seems like she was given instead apes as her protectors. So instead of protection from apes, she was given protection, from apes. So it's very, very neat. Like to me, it's so fairy in the way like the language plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating that fairies and Bigfoot and UFOs all seem to experience it's quite common for experiences to experience more than one phenomena.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I was wondering, have you had anything that you could call a fairy experience, or how would you label it?
I these are, and I truly believe Bigfoot, all this stuff, they're spirits of place, and I absolutely believe, fairies are that as well. And I do believe I've had interchange with these sort of natural spirits and these spirits of place, and in fact, the story I was talking about, the fairy fort, I kind of broke the rules. I broke the rules of folklore, and I think I was sort of smacked on the butt for doing so. To try to make a long story short, I had entered into this gifting exchange, and I started bringing food, and I elevated it to alcohol. And I left a little glass bottle of wine. And it's the place where I was leaving gifts, and there was a little hole in this tree where I couldn't reach my hand in. A small child could reach their hand in, but this is off trail. This isn't anywhere that someone's just going to wander by. I'd found a big old stack of boulders there that were stacked in this tree. And I was very interested in this place because every time I would put a cairn on top of those boulders, it would be knocked off. It would be returned to place. And in fact, I have a very, very strong friend who at one point put another boulder on top of those boulders. I could not lift this. This guy's a monster. Like he picked up, like you would be, it looked like a superhero picking something. I couldn't believe any one man could pick up a rock this size. And he put it on top there. He's like, let's see what happens now. The next time I went, that boulder was off and nowhere in sight. It was completely removed. Yeah.
Ooh,
so
chills.
it's very, very interesting place. And in any case, I started leaving gifts, escalated to alcohol. When I left the alcohol the first time, I said, I would like a skull, please. And I asked for something. This is a no-no. I did not know this at the time, folklorically. You're not really supposed to ask for things. Well, I walked into that copse of, it was about 10 minutes away from where I was, into that copse of trees with what I said could have been a fairy fort. And as I'm walking up to the top of this mound of stones, I look down and I see a very fresh, decapitated groundhog's head. And it immediately hit me that I got a skull. I asked for a skull and I got one, but it was just covered in gore. That's not what I meant. I don't like gore. I just don't like it. I like nice clean bones that have been, sun bleached but that, so I didn't take it. But I realized I'd gotten what I asked for, and I was so shocked I kind of backed out of there kind of in a shocked way. Some days go by, and I was talking to my friend Clint on his podcast, OK Talk, and we were talking about three things. We were talking about Seth Breedlove, who's the guy that makes some of those Small Town Monsters movies. We were talking about how much the paranormal is like the kind of putting on the One Ring in the Lord of the Rings, and when you start messing with the paranormal, you put on, and the great eye like turns and looks at you, right? It's like, oh, okay, I see. And then we were talking about, oddly, raccoons, and he was telling me this sort of folk way of catching raccoons, where you put something shiny in a jug, they'll reach in and grab it, and they don't know to let go of it, and you'll find him in the morning with their, the raccoon with his hand in the jug because he won't let go of the shiny object. The next day, I went hiking with my son, and I parked in this same place where I had been gifting at, ironically, the place is called the Crossroads parking lot. So I parked literally at a crossroads, went on a hike with my son, and at some point, he kind of stands straight up, and I could tell he's in better shape than me, so he's about 20, 30 yards ahead of me. And I catch up to him, like, what do you see? And he's like, is that a raccoon up there? I said, oh, yeah, it is, but, they should be out during the day. Let's take another trail. Well, as soon as we turn around, I kind of look back and this thing starts trotting at us. So I told my son, run. He's in his early teens at this point. And the only thing I could think of is I have to put myself between this and my son. And I had a walking stick, and I think it was just sheer luck or a guardian angel or something. I broke this thing's neck before it got to me. It was running so fast. I tried to outrun it and look back. I was like, I'm not going to outrun this thing. And if you look up raccoon attacks, they're vicious. You don't want to be attacked by a raccoon. And I thought, I've got one chance, and if I don't, I'm going to be in a world of trouble. But let's see here. And again, pure luck. I broke its neck and killed it. It was rabid. It had rabies. I catch up to my son, and he was, again, young teenager, and I'm trying to lighten the mood because I could tell he's freaked out. And I didn't even know he had this ghost like look. He's like, Dad, I heard your battle cry. He's like, I never want to hear that again. He's like, it was so scary. I was like, I didn't even know I was like, I yelled or something. But I'm trying to break the tension. I said, oh, the only thing I wish I would have yelled, you shall not pass, before I brought my staff down upon this thing. So I made a reference to Tolkien.
Yeah.
We get back to the parking lot to our car, and I said, I better call park ranger. There was an animal attack. It was probably rabid. We confirmed later it was. I better report this. So I call park ranger. The ranger that shows up, his name tag is Breedlove. And at this point, the synchronicities all kind of hit me at once. And I'm realizing like the chances of all of this coming together. And later I talked to that director, Seth Breedlove. I said, how common is your name? He's like, it's not common in America at all. It's very odd that this fellow would have that name. So very, very strange set of incidents. And I truly believe, so the folklore says you're not supposed to ask something, but for goodness sake, if you ask for something and it's given to you, you better take it. And
Yes.
I broke two rules there. I asked for it and I didn't take it when it was given to me. And I truly think all of that had to do with breaking the rules. There was just such a weird feeling about it. I remember it didn't all hit me until I saw the park ranger's name tag, and then all the synchronicities kind of sunk in at once. I was like, whoa. And the whole thing kind of hit me, and it took me a while to put it together, but I really think that I broke the rules. And I think that, I sort of paid for it.
Yeah, these things are so fascinating, aren't they? And I find it so subtle as well. And it's unless you're talking to somebody that has a bit of experience with the way that this works, it's difficult to really convey, I find, because it's like, well, that happened, and then I saw that symbol, and then
Right.
it's like,
Exactly. Yeah, I always say it's not a straight line, it's a spider web.
yeah,
And it's so hard to tell these stories because you have to jump back. So, well, that relates to this thing back here, but then that happens up here, and it's a spider web, and you pull one and you move the other thing.
yeah. Do you ever see symbols? Because one of the things that I quite often see are heartstones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever
Yeah.
found these? I quite often find heartstones. I don't ask for them, but it's quite often when I'm going onto the land, I'll be like, oh, heartstone. Or the other thing is cross sticks. I'll just be like, oh, that must have just fallen randomly. But I'm just like, no, that's a cross. That's like a cross sticks.
Yeah. Yes, stick glyphs are absolutely a thing. Again, these are, and it's always this question mark, right? They're always like, well, it could have fallen that way, but they seem intentionally placed. They seem to be in specific areas. Heartstones, I don't collect them, but I see them a lot. I know a lot of my friends collect them, and I will see them often in these weird places, literally like placed at the base of a tree or something. Did a person do this or no, I don't know, but they're all around. I see them frequently. Again, I just said you shouldn't ask for things. And there's a place in Indiana where we've been going. One day I will tell the full story. We've talked about it on Strange Familiars a bit in the Witch Diggers, but I was in the main area of this. So this goes back to a story from the 1800s. And I've never found a hagstone. Never once. I've been given many, but I've never found one. And I thought there's a creek that runs through this area, and I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if, like, to get a hagstone from here would mean so much to me. And I literally said, I'd really appreciate it if I could find a hagstone here. It would mean so much to me. I just said it out loud. Within 5 minutes, I bent down and picked up the most beautiful hagstone I have ever seen in my life. And I was like, what can you say about that?
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
They're so rare as well. I mean, it's, and just like you say, to spot it within a few moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And after a whole life of looking for them I'm constantly looking for hagstones and always disappointed I never found one. And I feel like I have such a connection to this place. We call it the Witch Ditch. It weaves into the Witch Digger story. And I just thought, boy, it would mean so much to get a hagstone from here. It would mean everything to me. And to have that happen, and it's just the coolest hagstone, that of all I've been given or seen. I love it so much. And I was like completely, and what do you do with that? If to anyone else, to a skeptic, oh, it's just dumb coincidence. It's like, yeah, no. No, it's like
No.
the feeling of finding that and the feeling of just being there and how important that is to me. I mean, to me, it's like a treasure. I
Yes.
absolutely found a treasure, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so strange you should say that because before I speak to people, I always draw out a card. So, what was it? Follow the secret. So I drew this one, the troll fae,
Oh, wow.
and it's follow the secret signs as treasures can be found where you least expect them.
Oh, look at that. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and
Mm.
another thing that I talk about a little bit in Where the Footprints End is what I call buried treasure theory, and I'm going to explore this a lot deeper in the future. But one of the questions I started asking, so I will, because of my job, I'm perfectly set up to, if someone sees Sasquatch or something around here, I can be there immediately. I can drop what I'm doing and go there. In most cases, sometimes I can't. I can get there within a day, usually.
Mm.
So I get to go on a lot of these, when witnesses see Bigfoot, I get to be there as soon as possible. And I collect all the information I can. But I started a series of questions. I asked the weather. I asked about nearby creeks. Never gotten a no to that, by the way. So I don't know. My big question to that is this because Pennsylvania has a ton of creeks, or is there something to do with running water and this stuff?
Mm.
But one of the questions I ask is, where is the buried treasure? And by that, I mean not necessarily, a chest full of gold. It could be a mine. It could be a quarry, something valuable in the ground. It could be the idea of sometimes it's just these things live in caves, right? They the things themselves can actually be the treasure. And this idea of buried treasure in one sense or another comes up again and again and again and again. I'm going to say over 80% of the people are like, oh yeah, there's a legend of a silver mine over here that, lost silver mine, or,
Mm.
yeah, there's supposed to be buried treasure. Somebody, buried a chest full of coins from the Civil War here, or something like that. It comes up again and again. So there's an idea of, treasure with this stuff, or something valuable in the ground.
Yes, very much. I do a lot of dousing and
Oh yes, me too.
yeah, do you? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously it's your body, isn't it, that's sensing it. But now, at the beginning of the year, I stayed in a friend's wood and oh my gosh, that place is just full of fairy activity. And I was sensing there's gold here, there's gold here. I was being told this and I was seeing it. And they'd not told me this. And I actually had we did some meditation there in this yurt that they have for sacred rituals, group activities. And I saw this in meditation, this very clear band of little people coming through that were golden. And they went through one side, they kind of went through the south to the north of this sacred space. And I told the woman my friend that owns the wood, what I'd seen. She said, "Oh yeah, I saw the same thing."
Oh really?
Yeah, and so there's lots more to this, but anyway, I said, there's for some reason I think there's gold here, and she said, "Yeah, there is." She said, "How did you know that?" I said, "Well, I just saw it. I just sensed it, and when I saw those little people that were golden, that
Mhm.
confirmed it for me." And she said, "Yeah, there's like a vein of
Mhm.
gold that goes through, and it's on a ley line."
Wow.
So
Huh.
yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I
Mm,
dowsing is I yeah, I it's amazing to me.
mm,
I've made believers out of non-believers with it,
mm,
by able my one friend who started out as quite a skeptic, and through his journeys with me has become every bit of the believer that I am,
mm,
which is wonderful to see. There's a place where we see mystery lights frequently.
mm.
Like, if you were to come and visit me and say, I want to see something weird, I would take you to this place. Not a guarantee, but high chance that we're going to see some strange lights there. And he heard me talk about it. He said, well, take me there. I'll tell you what it is. And I'm open to that. I'm like, he's a forager. He's out in the woods all the time. You know, I'm like, fine, let's go. If you can explain it, good, you know. And I took him there. And by the end of the night, he's laughing. He's like, I don't know what these are. You know, he's like literally like on his knees trying to, they were very curious that night for some reason. These lights were coming right up to us. He's literally trying to grab one, he's on his knees reaching, trying to grab one and laughing with sort of joy, I think, of just not being able to explain this. I said, I told you. Yeah, I did. I told. But one day there's a legend of a werewolf's grave in Pennsylvania, and I was shown where this is. It's called Die Wolfmannsgrab. And it's so supposedly a man was shot in wolf form, and they found him as a man in the morning, and they buried him there, and that place became known as Die Wolfmannsgrab. And I was shown where the actual grave was by a guy, I think he was in his 70s, and he was shown where it was by a guy who was in his 80s in the 1970s. So, it's sort of like keeping this folklore alive. And he couldn't believe I was interested. I contacted this guy. I took him to lunch, and he showed me where the grave was. It was a wonderful day. But I was trying to figure out where the actual grave itself was, where the person was buried. And I was trying to douse for it. And I'm walking across this field, and the rod's pointing down the same place every time. And I said to my friend John, who was there, the same guy, I said, I think it's right here. And he starts laughing, and he says, you want to know what's there? And I said, no. And there was a water tile, drainage underneath the field, and I was hitting on the water, but I did it so consistently every single, and I didn't know it was there. And he's a farmer, so he knew exactly what was happening. But he's like, oh, it works. You can totally find water with it. I was like, absolutely find water. Like, water's no problem. My dad found our well on the farm with it. I'm positive I can find water with it. But I've had luck with other things too, and paranormal stuff. Tracking on this one investigation, and honestly, I really didn't believe the witness until I did this. I just thought, I don't know, it was like too much, and I just thought maybe she's making more of things than there is. There was a graveyard across from her house or a cemetery, rather. And she's saying she's seen lights in the cemetery. And when it got dark, I stayed there till dark. There were lights in the cemetery, but they were man-made lights. And I thought, oh, she's seeing those. So I really wasn't sure about the whole thing until my other friend, Chad, he has almost like spidey sense for the paranormal, where he will literally show me his arm, and the hair on his arm is standing straight up, and he's like, there's something here. And he did that, and I looked down, and there was a perfect stick to use for a dowsing rod. It was a perfect stick, and I just picked it up and started dousing, and I could feel the pull. He's like, I think whatever it was crossed the field here, and you could see a sort of wake in the field where something had been through, and I could feel the pull of this rod. And we literally followed this, and we could tell where whatever it was crossed a fence, and we're by this woman's house now. And I walked behind this sort of mound. They were doing some work, and they had a mound of dirt. And I walked behind this mound of dirt, and the dowsing rod pulled so hard it snapped in my hands. It actually broke off in my hands. It pulled down that hard. I didn't do it. I'm holding it like this. It snapped. Never had that happen before. And when I talked to the woman, I said, what happened behind that dirt pile? And she was like, oh yeah, that's where she had said these Bigfoot were coming on her property. So that's where I see Bigfoot all the time, right behind that dirt pile. I'm like, yeah, so I'm pretty sure you can use it, dowsing rods to like sort of figure out where these things have been.
Yeah, you can use them to find all sorts of things. And, I won't go on about my stories, but I've got a story about finding, my son found a Y-shaped stick, and we found a place where there was a portal. This was like a few years ago, and he was a lot younger. He's 19 now. Yeah, and it was a place where lots of trees had fallen down. They'd been ripped up by storms. And he picked up this stick. He said, Mum, I'm going to find the portal. And I was like, oh, wow. And it was pointing towards this area of trees where these big trees have been ripped up. And actually, in that clearing, we could see these figures, but they were superimposed on trees. I took some photographs, and one of them looks like this being It looks like this sort of gnome type being that's healing the tree.
Oh
It's
wow.
quite tall. Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
interesting.
absolutely fascinating. Yeah, and I've incorporated dowsing rods into
Mm,
my work. And I'm hoping to find other people in America who do dowsing for more than just finding water. It's very common here. They call them water
mm,
witches. It's very common here to
mm,
find wells with that. But I want to. So ley line work is in the UK. They've done wonderful work and they've sort of mapped out
mm,
the ley lines everywhere. In America, some people have done it, but if you look at the maps, these ley lines, by the time you blow up the maps, are like 30 miles wide. They'll show a ley line running through Washington, D.C. up to New York and stuff. It's like, well, that's so imprecise.
mm.
And I have a feeling that these different places of interest are probably connected by ley lines. My personal theory is I wonder if, people think we built these sites or we made these sites on ley lines. I wonder if it's like the ley lines sort of grow out from these sites to these,
Yeah.
and meet where these other lines are growing out from these other sites. But I found what I think are ley lines, like connecting these sites. But I kind of want other people to confirm it, and because I would
Mm,
love just like kind of start on a ley line map of places in America that isn't just, like I said, like if you look, there's some online, but they're so imprecise.
mm.
And I would love to find out. I think dowsing is the way they did most of that in the UK, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
found the Michael line and Mary line.
hmm
But yeah, there's lots of other ley lines,
yeah,
lesser ley lines, and as you say, I think we've got the power of creating those new connections
hmm
with other places as well. So yeah, it's fascinating. I find it
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. I'm very pro dowsing. I think
Mm,
it's a wonderful tool, and again, it's one of those things where skeptics never going to believe you. Like no matter like I when I was doing that day, I said, Chad, feel the pressure on this, pulling down on this before it
mm,
broke. And he was like, I said, I'm not doing that. Like, there's no way I could put that kind of, I'm holding him like this. I could not put that kind of pressure on it by just holding it
mm.
like that. And yeah, I said, try to pull up on it. And he's like, wow, there's real pressure. I'm like, yeah. And eventually there was so much it just snapped, which is pretty amazing.
Gosh.
Now, I've
Mm,
been other places where I haven't had any luck with dowsing.
mm,
At the witch ditch, I tried to douse there, and it might be I didn't have the right dowsing rod. I'll have to take one of the ones. There's a prescription in the Long Lost Friend. It's a book for that powwow tradition in Pennsylvania, and they tell you how to cut dowsing rods. You do it on Christmas
mm.
between 11 p.m. and midnight, and facing east, and it's got to be a year's growth on the branch, et cetera, et cetera. And I cut a bunch of them that way, which I feel like I have better luck with those, than just some random stick. So I'll have to take one of those back and see if I can douse there. But I did try there, and considering the connection I feel with the place, it was odd. I really wasn't getting anything kind of dousing around there.
Yeah, it's like that sometimes. I don't know what it is, whether
Mhm.
it's cosmic energy
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
or just, the place is in a sort of a low
I
vibe.
think sometimes it can be the
Yeah,
day. Maybe
yeah,
your mood and state of mind can
mm,
affect it as well. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Oh, it's been great talking with you, Tim.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been so interesting. And so, where can people connect with your work and your books? And when's your book coming out? Your
So my
fellow book?
my hope is all the writing is done on the Keystone
Yeah.
Hagstone. I am
Mm,
right now in the layout and illustration, which is why it was so hard for me to find stories because it's
mm,
not in a nice even layout right now, but I could kind of thumb through it and get to
mm,
things easily. So I'm in the layout process and illustrating, and my hope is before 2026. So sometime in the late fall or early winter, I will have this book out. Hopefully, that's my hope. And it's a very very thick. My thickest book yet by some like 10,000 words or more. So it's going to be a don't drop it on your toe. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of information in there. So but
mm,
I have other books out. I released a book on hermits earlier this year called I've Never Minded the Loneliness. Several books on Bigfoot and various other paranormal phenomena. You can get them on Amazon. The split is okay. I don't, a lot of people are like, oh, don't buy it from Amazon. I don't, if that's easiest for people, fine. You can get them, you can order them into your local bookseller. That's always a lovely thing to do to support local booksellers. Or all of my information is at strangefamiliars.com. And you can find links to me and everything I do. And you can get signed copies of my books from my Etsy shop, etc. there. But all those links and my podcast is all at strangefamiliars.com.
Fantastic. Much appreciated, Tim. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
You as well.
As we close, the threads of Pennsylvania's folklore linger. Tim Renner's stories remind us that fairy lore is not confined to a single landscape or tradition. Whether in the deep woods of the Keystone State or the mossy lanes of the West Country, the same patterns appear. Strange lights, gifts left at thresholds, beings who slip between categories, and the synchronicities that nudge us toward wonder. His work invites us to look again at the places we think we know, to notice the subtle signs, and to remember that folklore is a living conversation between people and place. Thank you for joining me for this journey into Tim's world, and thank you to Tim. Until next time, may you recognise the fairy gifts in your path and travel safely through the deep, dark forests. And maybe don't look behind you.
Where dips the rocky highland of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake. The drowsy water rats, there we've hid our fairy vats, full of berries and of reddest stolen cherries. Come away.